Captain Jake Morrison watched the emergency lights flash red across the bridge of the U.E.'s Liberty. The rescue signal had come from the mining colony on Kepler 442b just 3 hours ago. Now his ship was racing through space at maximum speed to reach the survivors. "Captain, we have visual contact with the escape pods," reported Lieutenant Sam Davis from the navigation station. His voice was tense. 12 pods total. "Looks like they launched in a hurry." Jake nodded and turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the lead pod." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a woman with dirt and blood on her cheek. Her eyes were wide with fear and something else Jake could not identify. "This is Dr. Lisa Parker from the Kepler mining station," the woman said. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Captain, you need to know something terrible has happened here. It was not an accident. They came for us." "Who came for you, Doctor?" Jake asked. He felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "Aliens, Captain. They had ships we have never seen before." "But that is not the worst part." Lisa Parker's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Captain, they knew about us. They knew exactly how many people were on our colony. They knew our schedules. They knew everything." Jake looked at his first officer, Commander Rachel Stone. She had the same worried expression on her face that he felt inside. "Bring all the pods aboard immediately," Jake ordered, "and get our best medical team ready. I want to hear everything these people have to say." 20 minutes later, Jake sat in the ship's conference room with the survivors from the mining colony. Dr. Lisa Parker sat across from him, no longer shaking, but still pale. Next to her was Dr. Ben Hughes, the colony's language expert and engineer. Tom Wilson, who had managed to record video during the attack. "Show me what you recorded," Jake said to Tom Dot. The engineer placed a small device on the table and activated it. A holographic image appeared showing the mining colony from above. Everything looked normal at first. Then the sky filled with ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. "They had some kind of hiding technology," Tom explained. 1 second the sky was empty. The next second, there were 15 ships surrounding our colony. Jake watched as the alien ships landed. Strange creatures came out wearing armor he had never seen before. But what caught his attention was how organized they were. These aliens moved like they had done this many times before. "They went straight to the residential areas," Lisa said. "Not the mining equipment, not the power plants. They wanted the people." On the recording, Jake could see the aliens herding colonists into groups. Men, women, and children were being separated and loaded onto transport vehicles. It looked exactly like what he had seen in old history books about slave raids on Earth. Centuries ago. "How many people were taken?" Rachel asked. 237, Lisa replied. "Everyone who could not make it to the escape pods." Jake felt sick, but the worst was yet to come. "We managed to damage one of their ships before we escaped," Tom said. "It crashed about 2 miles from the colony. Ben and I went to look at it before the other ships left." Dr. Ben Hughes opened his tablet computer and showed them pictures from inside the crashed alien ship. Jake had to grip the table to keep his hands steady as he looked at the images. The ship had holding cells built specifically for humans. The beds were the right size for human bodies. The restraints were designed for human arms and legs. There were even food dispensers that provided nutrition suitable for human biology. "This ship was built to carry human prisoners," Ben said quietly. "But look at this." He showed them more pictures. These were of computer screens inside the alien ship. The text was in a language no human had ever seen before, but there were images that made everything clear. Pictures of humans. Detailed drawings of human anatomy. Charts showing human height, weight, and physical capabilities. And numbers. Lots of numbers that looked like prices. "We think this is some kind of catalog," Ben explained. Like a store catalog, but for people. Jake stared at the images. His mind was trying to process what he was seeing, but it was too horrible to accept. "There is more," Lisa said. She looked like she was about to be sick. "We found records going back years." This was not their first visit to human colonies. Rachel leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Remember the disaster at New Portland Colony?" 5 years ago?" Lisa asked. "The one where the reactor exploded and killed everyone?" Jake nodded. New Portland had been one of the worst disasters in human colonial history. 3,000 people had died when their fusion reactor overloaded. "We found video records on the alien ship," Ben said. New Portland was not an accident. The aliens attacked that colony too. They made it look like a reactor explosion to hide what really happened. The room became very quiet. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. How many other colonies? He asked. Tom activated another file on his device. A list appeared showing names and dates. 17 colonies in the past 20 years, Tom said. All of them reported as accidents or natural disasters. Mining explosions, reactor failures, asteroid impacts, disease outbreaks. But according to these records, they were all attacked. Jake counted the numbers in his head. Over 30,000 people. 30,000 humans who had not died in accidents. They had been captured and taken away. Where did they take them? Rachel asked. Ben showed them one more file. It was a star map, but not like any human star map. This one showed trade, routes between different alien worlds. And on many of those worlds, there were symbols that Ben believed meant slave markets. "We think they sell humans to other alien species," Ben said. "Humans are apparently very valuable as slaves because we can adapt to different environments and learn quickly." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the stars. For his entire life, he had looked at those stars and thought about the possibilities they represented. New worlds to explore. New places for humans to build homes and start families. Now he realized that humans had never been alone in space. They had been watched, studied, hunted. "Captain," Lisa said behind him, "there is something else you need to know." Jake turned around. "The aliens have been controlling where we build our colonies," she continued. "Look at this map." She showed him a chart of all human colonies in space. At first it looked random, but then Jake began to see the pattern. "They have been guiding us," Lisa explained, "making us think certain systems are good for colonization while steering us away from others. They have been herding us like farm animals, keeping us in areas where they can easily take people without Earth finding out." Jake felt something he had never felt before. It was rage, but bigger than any anger he had ever experienced. It was the kind of anger that changed everything. "How long do you think they have been doing this?" he asked. "Based on the records we found, at least 200 years, Ben replied. 200 years of human expansion into space. 200 years of thinking they were pioneers exploring an empty galaxy. But they had never been pioneers. They had been. Pray. Jake looked at each survivor in the room. He could see the same realization in their eyes that he felt in his heart. Humanity had been living a lie. Everything they thought they knew about their place in the galaxy was wrong. But now they knew the truth. And Jake Morrison realized that once humanity learned what had really been happening to them, everything would change. The aliens had made a terrible mistake. They had been so confident in their superiority that they had never considered what would happen if humans discovered what was being done to them. Now they were about to find out. The emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command was packed with more people than it had held before. Admiral Karen Davis looked around the table at the faces on the communication screens. Representatives from 57 human worlds were all connected to this single call. Every human colony, every space station, every mining outpost had sent someone to hear what Captain Jake Morrison had discovered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Davis began, "what you are about to hear will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy." Jake Morrison stood up and activated the holographic display in the center of the room. The images from the crashed alien ship appeared in the air above the table. Even though he had seen them before, Jake still felt sick looking at the pictures of human holding cells and slave catalogs. 3 days ago, we rescued survivors from the Kepler-4 42b mining colony, Jake said. What we learned from them is that humanity has been under attack for over 200 years. But we never knew it, because the attacks were made to look like accidents. Dr. Alex Turner, Earth's top alien life expert, leaned forward in his chair. He had been studying the alien technology that Jake brought back, and his face was pale. "The evidence is overwhelming," Dr. Turner said. "These aliens, who call themselves the hegemony, have built their entire society around slave labor. And humans are their most valuable product." A woman's voice came from one of the communication screens. It was Governor Sarah Mitchell from the new Texas colony. "How is that possible?" she asked. "We have been expanding through space for 3 centuries. How could we not know about a civilization this large?" Dr. Turner activated another display showing a map of known space. Red dots appeared in dozens of locations. "Because they have been controlling where we go," he explained. "Look at this pattern. Every human colony is located in systems that are easy for the hegemony to reach, but far from their main territory. They have been farming us." Lieutenant Colonel Susan Grant, head of Colonial Intelligence, spoke up from her position at the table. She had been working around the clock since Jake's discovery, checking old records and investigating suspicious colony losses. "We have identified 33 colonies that were supposedly destroyed by accidents," she said. "Mining explosions, reactor failures, asteroid impacts, disease outbreaks. But now we know better. Over 45,000 humans have been taken as slaves, and we mourned them as dead." The room became very quiet. On the communication screens, Jake could see the shocked faces of colonial representatives. Some were crying. Others looked angry. All of them looked scared. Dr. Emma Foster, a doctor who studied how people think and behave, stood up to address the group. "I have been analyzing the psychological profiles that the aliens created of our species," she said. "They made a detailed study of human behavior, but they made a critical mistake in their understanding." "What kind of mistake?" Admiral Davis asked. "They correctly identified that humans are adaptable, intelligent, and cooperative," Dr. Foster explained. "They saw these traits and decided we would make perfect slaves. What they failed to understand is that these same traits make humans extremely dangerous when we identify a threat to our survival." Major Rick Coleman, a military officer who had fought in several colonial wars, stood up. His face was red with anger. "They have been hunting our people," he said, his voice getting louder with each word. "They have been taking our children and selling them in alien markets while we held funerals for empty graves. They think we are sheep to be herded and slaughtered." The other people in the room began to murmur agreement. Jake could feel the mood changing from shock and fear to something much more dangerous. "The question now," Admiral Davis said, "is what do we do about it?" Dr. Turner brought up another display showing the alien technology they had recovered. "The good news is that their technology, while more advanced than ours, is not designed for the kind of war they are about to face," he said. "Their ships and weapons are built around the idea that their enemies will fight according to predictable patterns. They have never faced an enemy that adapts and improvises the way humans do." Captain Linda Roberts, commanding officer of the Mars Defense Fleet, spoke from her communication screen. How many ships do they have? She asked. Based on the data we recovered, the hegemony controls over 300 star systems, Lieutenant. Colonel Grant replied. Their military has thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. But most of their forces are used for controlling slave populations, not fighting wars. Because they have never had to fight a real war, Major Coleman said. They have been bullying species that could not fight back, but we can fight back. Admiral Davis looked around the room and at all the screens showing colonial representatives. I am calling for an emergency vote, she said. All in favor of immediate military mobilization to rescue our people and defend against future attacks. Every hand in the room went up. On every communication screen, the colonial representatives voted yes. The vote was unanimous. Then it is. Decided, Admiral Davis said. As of this moment, humanity is at war. Over the next 2 weeks, something incredible happened across human space. News of the alien slave raids spread to every human world, every space station, every ship. The reaction was immediate and powerful. On Earth, factories that had been making civilian goods switched to producing weapons and military equipment. Scientists who had been working on peaceful research projects suddenly found themselves designing new types of warships. Engineers began modifying existing ships to carry more weapons and better shields. Most amazing thing was how many people volunteered to fight. General Mike Harrison, who was put in charge of organizing the new military force, watched in amazement as millions of humans signed up to join what they were calling the Human Liberation Force. I have never seen anything like it, General Harrison told Admiral Davis during one of their daily meetings. Farmers, teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, students. Everyone wants to help. We are getting more volunteers than we can train. Dr. Pete Rodriguez, who was leading the team studying captured alien technology, made breakthrough after breakthrough. Working almost 20 hours a day, his team figured out how alien shields worked, how their weapons operated, and most importantly, how their computer systems functioned. The aliens built everything around the idea that only authorized users would operate their technology. Dr. Rodriguez explained to Admiral Davis. They never considered that someone might hack their systems or use their own weapons against them. Commander. Nick Thompson was put in charge of modifying human ships with the new technology. The first test flights were amazing. Human ships equipped with alien shields and weapons were faster and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. The most important discovery came from Dr. Carl Mitchell, who was studying how the aliens thought and behaved. The hegemony is not just one species, he explained to the military leadership. It is dozens of species that were conquered and enslaved so long ago that they forgot what freedom looks like. The ruling species controls everyone else through fear and rigid hierarchy. What does that mean for us? Admiral Davis asked. It means they have never faced an enemy that thinks creatively or adapts quickly, Dr. Mitchell replied. Their entire military doctrine is based on following orders, exactly and never deviating from established plans. When we start fighting them, they will not know how to respond to tactics they have never seen before. Captain Amy Watson commanded the first squadron of ships that were fully equipped with the new hybrid technology. During training exercises, her ships performed maneuvers that would have been impossible with old human technology. We are not just building better ships, she reported to Admiral Davis. We are creating an entirely new way of fighting in space. The aliens have never seen anything like what we are preparing for them. But perhaps the most important development was happening in the intelligence division. Lieutenant Colonel Grant had been making contact with other species that had been enslaved by the hegemony. We are not the only ones who hate them, she reported. There are dozens of species throughout the galaxy who have been waiting for someone strong enough to lead a rebellion. When we start fighting, we will not be alone. As Admiral Davis looked at the reports coming in from across human space, she realized that something fundamental had changed about humanity. The discovery that they had been hunted and enslaved had awakened something deep in the human spirit. Every human world was preparing for war. Every human was ready to fight. And for the first time in their history, they were united by a single purpose: to rescue their enslaved people and make sure that no human would ever be taken again. The hegemony had spent centuries studying humans, but they had failed to understand the most important thing about the species they had been hunting. When humans discovered that their families, their friends, and their children were being stolen and sold as slaves, they did not just get angry. They got ready. General Mike Harrison stood in the command center of the largest military base humanity had ever built. 6 months ago, this place had been empty space near the Jupiter orbital stations. Now it was the headquarters of the Human Liberation Force, buzzing with activity 24 hours a day. "General, we have the latest recruitment numbers," reported Colonel Nancy Brooks, his assistant. 3.2 million volunteers from across all human worlds. We are having to turn people away because we cannot train them fast enough. Mike nodded as he looked at the displays showing human space. Every colony, every space station, every ship was contributing to the war effort. It was the biggest military build-up in human history, and it had happened in less than 6 months. "What about the new ships?" he asked. "Captain Tony Davis has the report on that," Colonel Brooks replied. Captain Tony Davis approached with a tablet computer in his hands. His face showed the excitement that everyone felt when they talked about the new technology. "General, the first 100 ships are ready for combat," Tony said. "We have taken our best warships and completely rebuilt them with alien technology. They are faster, stronger, and more heavily armed than anything we have ever had before." Mike walked over to the large window that looked out into space. He could see the new ships floating in formation near the base. They looked like human ships, but there was something different about them. They seemed more dangerous. "How do they perform?" "In combat trials?" Mike asked. "Better than we hoped," Tony replied. "The combination of human tactical thinking and alien technology is creating results we never expected. Our pilots are developing new fighting techniques that no alien species has ever seen before." Dr. Pete Rodriguez joined them at the window. He had been working non-stop for months, leading the team that was reverse engineering alien technology. He looked tired but excited. "General, we have made another breakthrough," Pete said. "We have figured out how to hack into the hegemony communication networks. We can listen to their messages and even send false information to their ships." Mike felt a smile cross his face. This was exactly the kind of advantage humans needed. "What are they saying to each other?" he asked. "That is the interesting part," Pete replied. "They know something is happening in human space. They can see our military buildup, but they do not understand what it means. They think we are preparing to defend our existing colonies. They do not realize we are preparing to attack them." Mike said, "Exactly. They have never faced a species that went on the offensive after being attacked. Every other species they conquered just tried to hide and defend themselves." Commander Nick Thompson arrived with his own report. He had been in charge of training the new human fleet commanders, and his job was one of the most important in the entire war effort. "General, I have been working with our best ship captains," Nick said. "We are developing new combat tactics that take advantage of how humans think differently from aliens." "Show me," Mike said. Nick activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a simulation of a space battle between human and alien ships. "Traditional space combat, the way aliens fight, is very structured," Nick explained. "Ships form into organized formations. They follow predetermined attack patterns, and they stick to their assigned roles throughout the battle. The simulation showed alien ships moving in perfect geometric patterns, like a dance that had been practiced many times. But humans do not fight that way, Nick continued. We adapt during the battle. We change tactics based on what the enemy does. We improvise and take risks that alien commanders would never consider. The simulations switched to show human ships. Instead of neat formations, they moved in unpredictable patterns. Instead of following a script, they seemed to be making decisions. In real time. The result is that alien commanders cannot predict what we will do next, Nick said. They are trained to fight enemies that behave according to rules. We do not follow their rules. Captain Amy Watson, who commanded the first fully operational squadron of hybrid ships, stepped forward. General, I would like to show you what we have learned at our training exercises, she said. Amy activated another display, showing actual footage from recent training missions. Human ships were moving through space in ways that seemed impossible. They were using combinations of speed, firepower, and unpredictable movement that created completely new forms of space combat. We are not just building better ships, Amy explained. We are inventing entirely new ways to fight in space. The aliens have never seen anything like this, because no species has ever fought the way humans fight. Dr. Carl Mitchell, who had been studying alien psychology and culture, joined the group. General, I have been analyzing the intelligence we have gathered about hegemony society, Carl said. What we have learned gives us significant advantages. What kind of advantages? Mike asked. The hegemony has been in control for so long that they have become complacent, Carl explained. They have not fought a real war in over 300 years. Their military exists mainly to control slave populations, not to fight against organized resistance. Carl brought up a map showing hegemony space. More importantly, their empire is built on a foundation of fear and strict obedience, he continued. Every species in their empire is terrified of the ruling class. They follow orders without question because they have been programmed to never think for themselves. How does that help us? Mike asked. Because it means their military commanders are not trained to think creatively or adapt to unexpected situations, Carl replied. When we start using tactics they have never seen before, they will not know how to respond. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Grant, who had been working on intelligence gathering, approached with her own report. General, we have made contact with resistance. Groups inside hegemony space, she said. There are dozens of species that have been enslaved for so long they had given up hope of ever being free. What are they telling us? Mike asked. They are telling us that the hegemony is not as strong as they appear, Susan replied. Most of their military is made up of enslaved soldiers who are forced to fight. If we can show these enslaved species that the hegemony can be defeated, they might join us. Mike looked around at all the reports and displays. The picture they painted was clear. Humanity was not just preparing to defend itself. They were preparing to liberate an entire galaxy. How long before we are ready to begin offensive operations? He asked. 3 months, replied Admiral Corinne Davis, who had arrived during the briefing. We will have 500 ships ready for combat, with crews trained in the new tactics and equipped with hybrid technology. And our intelligence network? Mike asked. We have identified over 200 hegemony facilities where human slaves are being held, Susan replied. We also have detailed maps of their military positions and communication networks. Mike walked back to the window and looked out at the fleet of ships being prepared for war. Each ship represented thousands of hours of work by human engineers, scientists, and military personnel. But more than that, each ship represented the determination of an entire species to rescue their people and prevent anyone else from suffering the same fate. There is something else, General, Dr. Pete Rodriguez said. We have been monitoring hegemony communications, and we have noticed something interesting. What is that? Mike asked. They are starting to recall military units from their outer territories, Pete replied. They are concentrating their forces around their core worlds. I think they are beginning to realize that humanity might be more dangerous than they originally thought. Mike felt a cold satisfaction. The hegemony was right to be worried. How many species are we in contact with inside their territory? He asked Susan. 47 different species across 83 worlds, she replied. Many of them are ready to rebel if they see that the hegemony can be defeated. Mike turned to address everyone in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not just preparing to rescue our enslaved people, he said. We are preparing to lead the largest liberation movement in galactic history. Every species that has been enslaved by the hegemony is counting on us to show them that freedom is possible. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed the full scope of what they were attempting. The hegemony has controlled this galaxy for over 1,000 years, Mike continued. They think they are invincible because no one has ever successfully challenged them. They are about to learn that they have never faced an enemy like humanity. Admiral Davis stepped forward. General, we have confirmation that the first wave of liberation ships will be ready to launch in exactly 90 days, she said. Mike nodded. 90 days to finish preparing for a war that would determine the fate of billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. Then we had better make sure we are ready, he said. Captain Tony Davis watched his fleet emerge from hyperspace near the hegemony slave transport convoy. 15 alien ships were moving slowly through space, carrying thousands of enslaved beings from dozens of different species. This was exactly the kind of target the Human Liberation Force had been looking for. All ships, this is Captain Davis. He spoke into his communication system. Remember, our primary goal is to rescue the prisoners. Disable the ships, but try to avoid destroying them. The human ships moved into attack formation. They used tactics that no alien commander had ever seen before. Instead of approaching in straight lines like traditional space battles, the human ships came from multiple directions at once, constantly changing their positions and attack patterns. The hegemony. Ships tried to respond, but their commanders were confused by the human tactics. They had been trained to fight enemies who followed predictable patterns, but the human ships seemed to be making up their strategy as they went along. Their shield generators are exactly where Dr. Rodriguez said they would be, reported Lieutenant Sarah Miller from her ship. Targeting now. The first hegemony ship lost its shields within minutes. The aliens aboard sent frantic messages to their command center, but they could not understand how the humans had learned to attack their weak points so effectively. One by one, the hegemony ships were disabled. The human ships used precise weapons. Fire to destroy only the alien weapons and engines, leaving the prison areas untouched. It was a level of precision that required both advanced technology and exceptional piloting skills. All hegemony ships are disabled, Captain, reported Commander Julie Roberts. Beginning rescue operations now. The human ships docked with the alien transports and began evacuating the prisoners. What they found inside was horrifying, but also inspiring. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were crammed into tiny cells, many of them barely alive. But when they saw human soldiers coming to rescue them, something amazing happened. They began to hope. Captain Davis, this is Dr. Jane Mitchell aboard the rescue ship, came a voice over the communication system. We have rescued over 3,000 prisoners from these ships. But Captain, you need to hear what they are telling us. What are they saying, Doctor? Tony asked. They are saying that there are resistance groups on dozens of hegemony worlds. Species that have been waiting for someone to lead a rebellion against their enslavers. They want to join our fight. Tony felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly what the human command had hoped for. Get all the intelligence you can from them, he ordered, and treat their injuries. These people have suffered enough. The rescue operation was the first of many. Over the next 3 months, human fleets conducted lightning-fast raids throughout hegemony space. They rescued enslaved beings, captured alien technology, and gathered intelligence about hegemony military operations. But the real war began when Admiral Steve Parker led the main human fleet in their first major battle against a hegemony military force. The battle took place near a hegemony military base that controlled 3 star systems. The alien commander, Admiral Vextar of the ruling hegemony species, had positioned his ships in a traditional defensive formation. He had 200 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, just as hegemony military doctrine required. All human ships. This is Admiral Parker. Steve spoke to his fleet of 150 ships. Remember your training. We do not fight by their rules. The human ships approached the hegemony formation in a pattern that looked random but was actually carefully planned. They moved in small groups, each group attacking different parts of the alien formation at the same time. Admiral Vextar tried to respond according to his training. He ordered his ships to maintain formation and follow standard defensive procedures. But the human attacks were coming from too many directions at once. Human ships are attacking Sectors 7, 12, and 18 simultaneously, reported his tactical officer. They are not following any known attack pattern. Impossible, Vextar replied. No species attacks without proper formation. Continue. Standard defensive protocol. But the standard defensive protocol was not working. Human ships were using hit-and-run tactics, attacking quickly and then disappearing before the hegemony ships could respond. They were targeting specific weak points on alien ships with an accuracy that seemed impossible. Captain Dan Phillips commanded one of the human attack groups. His 6 ships moved through the hegemony formation like they were dancing, avoiding alien weapons fire while destroying enemy ships with surgical precision. Their commanders are too rigid, Dan reported to Admiral Parker. They keep trying to maintain formation even when it is obviously not working. They cannot adapt to our tactics. The battle lasted 4 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The hegemony ships, despite having superior numbers, could not cope with human tactics that changed constantly throughout the fight. When it was over, 50 hegemony ships had been destroyed or disabled, while the humans had lost only 8 ships. But more importantly, the humans had captured the hegemony command ship with all its intelligence data intact. Colonel Greg Anderson led the boarding party that captured Admiral Vextar and his command staff. The alien admiral was in a state of shock, unable to understand how his superior force had been defeated by a smaller number of primitive ships. "How did you learn our tactical weaknesses so quickly?" Vextar asked through the translation device. "We did not learn your weaknesses," Greg replied. "We created them. Your tactics work against enemies who think like you do. But humans do not think like you do." The captured hegemony command ship contained the most valuable intelligence the humans had found so far. Dr. Mary Taylor, working with a team of analysts, spent weeks going through the alien computer files. What they discovered changed everything. "Admiral Parker, you need to see this," Mary said during one of the daily briefings. "The hegemony is not just a military empire. It is an economic system built entirely on slave labor." She brought up displays showing the structure of hegemony society. Every industry, every service, every aspect of their civilization depends on enslaved workers, she continued. They have been doing this for so long that they have forgotten how to function without slaves. What does that mean for our war effort? Admiral Parker asked. It means that every world we liberate weakens their entire empire, Mary replied. They cannot replace the workers we free because they do not know how to do the work themselves. The intelligence also revealed something else that was crucial to human strategy. The hegemony was not a single unified species. It was a collection of dozens of species, most of which had been enslaved so long ago that they had forgotten their original cultures. Many of the species fighting for the hegemony are not doing it by choice, Mary explained. They are forced to serve in the military because their families are held hostage. If we can show them that the hegemony can be defeated, they might switch sides. This intelligence led to a new phase of the war. Instead of just fighting hegemony military forces, the humans began conducting liberation operations on hegemony worlds themselves. Captain Sandra Miller commanded the first planetary liberation mission. Her target was a hegemony world where millions of enslaved beings worked in factories that produced military equipment. Remember, our goal is not conquest, Sandra told her landing forces. Our goal is liberation. We want to free the enslaved populations and help them take control of their own world. The operation was a complete success. The hegemony military forces on the planet were defeated within hours, but more importantly, the enslaved populations rose up to join the humans. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. They tore down the monuments to their enslavers and began the difficult work of rebuilding their societies. Sandra, this is incredible, reported Major Lisa Carter from the planet's surface. We are not just winning battles. We are starting a revolution that is spreading across the entire hegemony empire. As news of human victories spread, resistance movements began appearing on hegemony worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had given up hope of ever being free suddenly had something to fight for. The hegemony leadership, safe in their capital city on their homeworld, watched in growing panic as their empire began to collapse from within. The humans are not just defeating our military, reported General Korthax to the Hegemony High Council. They are turning our own enslaved populations against us. This is not how warfare is supposed to work. Then we must make them follow the rules, replied Supreme Overlord Zexthul. Gather all our remaining forces. We will crush these humans with overwhelming power and show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the hegemony. But the Supreme Overlord did not understand that humans had never cared about following the rules. They were fighting for the freedom of every enslaved being in the galaxy, and they would not stop until every slave was free. The war was far from over, but the outcome was becoming clear. The hegemony had built their empire on the belief that the enslaved populations would never successfully rebel. They had never considered what would happen if someone came to help those populations fight back. Now they were learning that slavery was not just morally wrong. It was also strategically stupid. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the massive planet below. This was Hegemony Prime, the capital world of the Empire that had enslaved billions of beings across the galaxy. After 3 years of war, the humans and their allies had finally reached the heart of enemy territory. Admiral, we have reports from all sectors, said Captain Linda Roberts. The orbital defense stations have surrendered. The hegemony fleet is requesting permission to negotiate. Jake felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because the war was finally ending. Sadness because of all the lives that had been lost getting to this point. Put me through to the Hegemony Command Center, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Supreme Overlord Zexthul, the leader of the Hegemony Empire. The alien looked nothing like Jake had expected. Instead of appearing powerful and threatening, Zexthul looked tired and defeated. I am Supreme Overlord Zexthul, the alien said through the translation device. I wish to discuss the terms of our surrender. Jake was quiet for a moment. For 3 years, he had imagined what he would say to the leader of the species that had enslaved his people. Now that the moment was here, he felt only a deep sadness for all the suffering that could have been avoided. Supreme Overlord, I am. Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Liberation Force, he replied. Your surrender is accepted. But we need to discuss what happens next. What do you mean? Zexthel asked. We mean that ending the war is just the beginning, Jake said. We need to talk about how to rebuild this galaxy so that slavery never happens again. 2 weeks later, representatives from 43 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Hegemony Prime. Many of these species had been enslaved for so long that they had forgotten what their original governments looked like. Others had never been free at all. General Lisa Carter, who had been put in charge of organizing the war crimes trials, stood before the assembly. We are here today to decide the fate of those who built and maintained the slave empire, she said. But we are also here to decide what kind of galaxy we want to build in its place. The trials took months. Thousands of hegemony officials, military, officers, and slave traders were brought before judges from dozens of different species. The evidence of their crimes was overwhelming. Records showed that over 2 billion beings had been enslaved by the hegemony over the past 1,000 years. Some of the testimony was almost too horrible to hear. Former slaves described lives of constant fear, brutal working conditions, and the pain of being separated from their families. Hegemony officials had treated sentient beings like property, buying and selling them without any consideration for their suffering. But as the trials continued, something unexpected began to happen. Many ordinary hegemony citizens began to speak out against their own government. Dr. Chris Wilson, who had been appointed as humanity's chief representative to the post-war negotiations, listened to these testimonies with growing hope. Many of the hegemony people were victims too, he told Admiral Morrison during one of their regular meetings. They lived in a society that demanded total obedience and punished anyone who questioned authority. They were afraid to speak out against slavery because they knew they would be punished. What are you suggesting? Jake asked. I am suggesting that we have a choice, Chris replied. We can treat all hegemony citizens as criminals, or we can help them build a better society. Some of them want to change. We should give them that chance. The decision was not easy. Many of the freed slaves wanted revenge against all hegemony citizens. They had suffered for so long that they wanted the people who had enslaved them to suffer in return. But Captain Sandra Miller, who had been working with former slaves throughout the galaxy, made a powerful speech to the assembly. I understand the desire for revenge, she said. I have seen the suffering that slavery caused. I have held dying children who were worked to death in alien factories. I have comforted parents who watched their families torn apart by slave traders. The assembly hall was completely quiet as Sandra continued. But if we respond to their evil with more evil, we become like them, she said. If we enslave the enslavers, we prove that we learned nothing from our own suffering. The way to honor the victims of slavery is not to create more victims. It is to build a galaxy where no one is ever enslaved again. The debate continued for weeks, but eventually the assembly reached a decision. The hegemony empire would be completely dismantled. All enslaved beings would be freed immediately. War criminals would be punished according to their crimes. But ordinary hegemony citizens would be given the chance to participate in building a new galactic government based on freedom and equality. President Matt Johnson, who had been elected to lead the new government, addressed the first session of what they called the Galactic Freedom Council. We did not fight this war to become conquerors, he said. We fought to end slavery forever. Today, we begin the work of building a galaxy where every being has the right to control their own destiny. The work was enormous. Entire worlds had to be rebuilt. Species that had been enslaved for centuries had to relearn how to govern themselves. Economic systems that had been based on slave labor had to be completely redesigned. Captain Tony Davis, who now commanded ships carrying medical supplies and food to former slave worlds, sent regular reports back to Earth about the progress being made. "It is amazing to see," he wrote. "Species that had forgotten their own languages are teaching them to their children again. Worlds that had been strip-mined by slave labor are being restored to their natural beauty. People who had lived their entire lives in fear are learning to hope again." But the most important work was making sure that slavery could never return. Dr. Mary Taylor, working with representatives from all the freed species, designed a new galactic government that would prevent any one species from gaining too much. "Power. The key is balance," she explained to the Galactic Freedom Council. "No single species can be allowed to control the military, the economy, and the government at the same time. Power must be shared so that no one can use it to enslave others." The new government also established the Galactic Liberation Force, a military organization made up of volunteers from all species. Their job was to investigate reports of slavery anywhere in the galaxy and to intervene immediately when they found it. "Never again" became the motto of the new galaxy. Never again would any being be bought or sold like property. Never again would children be taken from their parents to work as slaves. Never again would any species be allowed to build an empire on the suffering of others. 5 years after the end of the war, Admiral Jake Morrison visited a former hegemony slave world that had been transformed into a thriving colony. The beings who lived there now were free to choose their own leaders, practice their own religions, and raise their children in safety. "Admiral, thank you for coming," said Elder Keftau, a member of the species that had originally lived on this world before the hegemony enslaved them. "We wanted to show you what we have built." Jake looked around at the beautiful city that had risen where slave factories had once stood. Children of dozens of different species played together in parks. Adults worked at jobs they had chosen for themselves. Art and music filled the air. "This is what we fought for," Jake said quietly. "No, Admiral," Elder Keftal replied. "This is what you gave us the chance to build for ourselves. The greatest gift is not freedom itself, but the opportunity to create something beautiful with that freedom." As Jake's ship left the planet, he reflected on what humanity had accomplished. They had started this journey as victims, discovering that they had been hunted and enslaved for centuries. They had ended it as liberators, helping to free an entire galaxy from the horror of slavery. But perhaps the most important lesson was that the strongest response to evil was not more evil, but the determination to build something better. The hegemony had ruled through fear, violence, and oppression. The new galaxy was being built on hope, cooperation, and the belief that every being deserved a chance to determine their own fate. The slavers' fate had indeed been locked in the moment humanity discovered the truth. But it was not the fate of destruction that many had expected. It was the fate of being replaced by something infinitely better. A galaxy where freedom was not just a dream, but a reality for everyone. As Jake looked out at the stars, he knew that humanity had found its true purpose in the universe, not as conquerors or rulers, but as protectors of freedom and defenders of the innocent.